Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Like I said, this is the February edition of CloudBytes, where we will be doing the first release of the year, 2021 highlights, hosted by Dean Dorton. Presenting today is Philip Massey, our Software Services Director. Thank you so much for joining us today, and do not hesitate to ask any questions. Without further ado, I give you Philip Massey.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to this presentation. My name is Philip Massey. As Julia said, I'm the Software Services Director here. So I know most of you, but some of us haven't had the pleasure of speaking and talking before. I will say, just for one thing while I am here, my proverbial door is always open. My email is always available, as is my phone. So if you guys have any questions about anything, either this presentation, Sage Intacct in general, Dean Dorton, whatever it may be, I always welcome your feedback and your communication. So I appreciate your time today. So we're going to take a look at the Release 1 highlights, and there are some pretty exciting things in this Release 1 of 2021. And that probably sort of relates to you, my geek level, by saying there's some exciting things in a software release, but we'll get into them, we'll talk about it, and I hope that you will agree that some of these things can be pretty exciting. So just wanted to remind you of what the release schedule is. We are, of course, talking about Release 1. Release 2 is just around the corner, May 21st. Hopefully it's a warmer corner than it is today in most places, but May 21st, August 20th, and November the 12th. So those are your upcoming releases. I want to make you guys aware, before we jump into this content here for just a minute, of something. I want to make sure you are aware of something that is possible with Intacct. That's called a preview company. So a preview company is really essentially your data in a different environment that'll give you a preview of all the new functions. So when I talk to you about how cool the GL Outlier detection feature is in Intacct, you could already know that by now. So if you want to get in on the preview release, you certainly can. Submit requests to the email address that you see there, or Kim Denton, if you would like to go through Kim on our team. She can certainly help get that arranged for you as well. Actually, that is incorrect. Send it to Kim Denton. I apologize. I'll get that corrected before this slides go out. But send an email to Kim Denton, and she'll help you get on those previews. As always, I want to make sure that you guys know that the release notes are in the software. So you should be seeing these notifications on the screens as you go into them. You will have access to videos. You'll have access to documentation. You'll have access to really a plethora of things that you could use to make the release experience better. And I highly encourage you to take advantage of all of those things. We've got some Wednesday wisdom coming up here. You'll hear from Kim on these. These will be weekly recordings actually put out by Sage Intacct that will talk with you about different functions within the Sage Intacct solution and things that you as an end user might be interested in. Kim will be getting out to you the various different topics here soon if he hasn't already. So just keep an eye out for those, okay? So now let's actually get into the meat and heart of what you came here for. So we've got this broken out into a few areas. There's core, as you see here, core, which to me, one of the most exciting things is in the general ledger, and I've already kind of given it away a little bit here, but there are a few other really cool little features that have been added. There's the brand new domestic consolidation module. So for those of you that want a more automated consolidation process, but don't want to go to the expense of the global consolidation, there is now an option for you. There's project enhancements, inventory, app foundational enhancements, multi-tax, and reporting with a brand spanking new interactive visual explorer that will be available to you, which just sounds really cool and exciting to me to be able to visually explore your data. But let's look at the general ledger first. We're going to start at the heart of the system. So there's a couple of little financial report improvements, dashes for zeros. So instead of seeing zeros all over your financial now, you can go to a more traditional accounting format and display dashes. It's very similar to if you pick the currency format in Excel and you see dashes as opposed to zeros. Filter parameters, you can show the start and end dates at a report prompt. The default for this is actually set to be enabled, right? So, and that can be controlled under the filters. So in the report creation inside of Sage Intacct, under filters is where you'll find the control for that. So you're going to be able to show your starting and ending dates at the reporting prompt, and it's just going to be kind of a display right off to the side. And we will see some of these things. If I get through all these slides, there's a ton of stuff here. Hopefully I'll get through it, and if nothing else, be able to show you what I consider one of the neatest features in the release. Scheduled reports. I highlighted the piece here or highlighted it in red. So there's a new option to select on scheduled reports. This is the associated manager on the dimension record. So an employee manager, a department manager, you'll be able now to schedule reports and send them out based on the manager for a dimensional record. So with the use case below, select all locations for the report filter and enable associated manager. Sage Intacct will send the report to each location manager designated in the department or location manager record. So, right, we've made it a checkbox. If you are delivering email delivery, we've made it a checkbox. You can send it out and blast it out to each individual associated manager on that record. Okay. That's a nice feature. Departmental financials, entity financials, location financials, things like that. You can blast them out to the appropriate individual and really can save you a lot of time in distributing those financials. So the report center has a bit of a new look and feel. Core reports shows the financial reports and financial graphs, and then the advanced area shows custom reports, ICRW reports, and the new IVE information as well. So they sort of restructured the report center, got a bit of a new breakdown there, try to get it a little bit more organized, right? So you've got core reports in one area and advanced reports in another area. It's intended really to help you be able to better distribute the reports, group the reports, and understand who needs access to what reports, make it a little easier for you through that. So the gist really, kind of also goes back to the fact that core reporting is typically more straightforward. The advanced tools like the ICRW and the new Visual Explorer do take more work to create typically, and they can be quite a bit more advanced. Okay. So if you haven't seen the report center, would be great to jump over to that at some point today. I probably won't show you that in deference to this little baby right here. This, to me, is the biggest potential feature in Release 1 2021, and maybe one of the biggest potential feature releases in quite some time. The outlier detection is essentially artificial intelligence and machine learning built into your accounting system. So this is the first step in the process of what Sage Intacct has been talking about for many months now, of bringing to you a continuous close, faster month-end process, and overall artificial intelligence. Basically what happens is the outlier detection will analyze your data. The outlier detection will then participate in the GL entry and approval process to warn you when transactions seem to be out of line with your past transactional volume. So it's not going to really prevent you from doing anything. So it's not going to stop your work in any way, but it will say, hey, Mary, this GL transaction appears to be way different from the previous ones that you've entered. Your prior adjustment for office or for assets to expenses for, office purchases, laptops, things like that was typically maybe $1,000 or $2,000 a month. This month it's $25,000. Did you fat finger that? Is that supposed to still be that amount, or is this something you need to double check on in the system? So it's going to proactively try to catch errors. It does work in the GL journal process, and it actually is potentially, best of all, free. Now, let me caution you just a moment. It is free, so it is not going to cost you a dime to go to company, admin, subscriptions, AI machine learning, and enable it. However, one of the things that we would respectfully request that you do is at least let us know that you would like to turn this on, and let's have a short conversation about how it works, what it does, and what you can expect. We don't want to drag out the process. We don't want to keep you from doing it. We love it. It's just as a matter of preference for turning this on, I think we want to try to make sure that all expectations are there for what it's going to do and how it's going to work prior to turning it on. Okay? So the detection works when approvals are enabled. So you need to have that. Each journal to be assessed has to be configured for approval. A minimum of 1 month's historical data needs to be included, and they need to be configured for at least one entity and journal. So when you go in and look at the setup of the GL outlier detection, it does take a little bit to get it done. Above and beyond just simply subscribing. So there again, we want to just be cautious, and we encourage everyone really to turn this on, but we just want to be there with you to help you get that turned on. And I'll actually go through and we'll look at that if I get through these slides in time and we have enough availability at the end. So that's a cool feature. I think that's really the first step of Sage Intacct into AI and machine learning. I can envision the day, and this is just pure speculation on my part, where you have this same technology and AP entry, and it is watching for accounts payable bills, right? We've got approvals there. It could watch for account payable bills. It could let you know when a bill seems out of whack. So I see this being extremely important because it's the first step in this process, and the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more that I see coming down the path, purely from my speculation, of course, but I believe that it will be the first of many things that will have artificial intelligence and get us to that almost continuous close. So we do have a couple things changed in GL approvals. You can share the GL journal entry approval responsibility now. So you can set up substitute approvers or group approvers in the system. And it's with the groups, it is one of those things. If you've got 4 people designated, first come, first serve. The first person that gets to it and approves it can approve it. And then the substitutes or delegates can be set up in the system as well. And you can predefine your delegate in your preferences and Intacct. So just in the solution under my preferences, you can delegate or designate your delegate. Okay, so that's general ledger. Accounts receivable, attachments while posting AR payments. So you can now receive, or when you are receiving an AR payment, you can now add an attachment. You can also then set up an email template if you want to send out an alert, and that email template can also include an attachment or that attachment from the receipt. Okay. So much like what you can do in order entry, if you attach documents to an order entry transaction in the system, for those of you that are familiar, they're bringing that same type of functionality to AR payments. Kind of neat. Overpayments, for as long as I can remember, which is, I guess, basically about 11 years now, 10 years now as Sage Intacct partner, the overpayment capability in AR only had department and location. As of this past release, they've added class and project. So you've got more ability to tag more dimensions to the overpayments. And to me, I think this is one of the last little holdouts of areas where most, if not all, of the dimensions aren't available. So it's good to see them moving in that direction to have really a more unified system and interface. It does mention contracts and user-defined dimensions will be supported in the future, but they are not there today. Okay. This is a small thing that I think can be handy for folks that have a lot of volume. Selecting invoices for payment, you can create filter sets now. So very similar to filter sets that you can create with AP bills in the select bill process. You can now filter down which invoices you see to receive payment for. So take a look at that feature. There's a number of different fields that can be used to do the filtering with. So it can make it very handy if you do process a lot of invoices and or payments to be able to go in and apply those properly and not have to scroll through a long list. Here again, posted payments filtering. They've added a deposit status. In other words, where it means the bank has, bank means deposited. So there's, if you look here at this screenshot, maybe the fifth column, there's a deposit status. And you see some say bank, some are blank, and some are undeposited. And that's another filter there for you to be able to use in your view for posted payments. Okay. Cash management, let's take a look. Posting details, it applies only, okay, so the new feature here with the posting details only applies to the accrual books, so don't see this in cash. Posting details tab on the credit card transaction and payoff screen and allows you to drill down to the posted journal entries. So if you see here at the top, credit card transaction information, there's a posting details screen. And if you were to click on that tab, then down here at the bottom is what you get. It shows you how that posted to the general ledger. I quite frankly love that. I wish that was something that was indeed available everywhere throughout the system, but I think good potential first step here. So we are showing you the posting details on these transactions. Also, you can view the AP bill that was created for a charge payoff. So if you're using credit cards in the system, you go through, use the charge payoff process, it creates the AP bill for you to pay the card. We now have more linkage between those two processes, those two documents within the system. So you can do a drill back into that charge off AP bill, as well as being able to, again, down at the bottom, see your general ledger posting detail. So some nice improvements there in that process. Bank transactions, so they've added some additional functionality into the bank transactions, the bank feeds here. These are nice, give you a little bit more functionality in that window as opposed to just being a kind of a view screen. I mean, it had more functionality than that, but in reality, in a lot of cases, it turned into really a view screen and wasn't quite as useful. So here is Sage Intacct improving upon that and giving you the chance to take some of those transactions and enter transactions for them. So funds transfers, journal entries, interest earned, other receipts, service charges, things like that. Much like what you had in the bank reconciliation window, except a little bit more tied into the bank feed process. So I think that's a great step in improving the bank feed. It's probably one of the #1 complaints with the bank feed was that you could see it, but you really couldn't do enough with it to get a lot of bang for your buck out of it, which, you know, it was free. So, but you really needed more functionality in it. So I'm super excited to see that they have improved that functionality. Sage Intacct Banking Cloud, if you are connected to it now and pulling down those transactions, it will automatically refresh every 4 hours. You can still do manual ones, but it's not required anymore. Do keep in mind, if you change your password or if your bank requires you to re-authenticate on a periodic basis, the feed will stop working automatically every 4 hours. That's just common sense. I know a bank I had used before would do that, and any kind of different bank connections I'd have to go back in and reset them all. So it now will refresh every 4 hours. Just monitor it if you are subject to re-authentication or you do change your password. Well, with R1 for the matching rules, the system will now take the extra step of detecting groups of transactions with like document numbers and connecting them to singular transactions in the bank. So that's really cool. If you've got, for whatever reason, a number of receipt transactions in the system and you had them, say, all on the same date and they were sequential numbers and you had one amount in the bank for that, the system should be able to, and this is, you know, not a perfect process, but should be able to detect that and should be able to match those transactions appropriately. And as any good consultant, I will use the word should in a lot of cases like that, because it is a machine trying to do something. So typical use case here, client gets one lump sum ACH payment. Lump sum makes it difficult. You can now edit the bank rec and select matching attributes and other selection options. So take a look at that. It's in the bank rec window, matching attributes, and you'll be able to go in and configure it as it shows here to be able to try to better match those larger transactions. Multi-entity usability. Okay, so there's a couple of things in here that I think are fairly cool. One is for companies that have a lot of entities. One really is aimed at companies that really only have one entity in it. So they've added a checkbox to restrict access to the top level only. A warning will appear when checking this box to check your permissions. It's used for customers who only work at the top level. It's not a permanent setting, and it doesn't affect external users who slide in, which would be partner users like us. So what this is if you guys have used Intacct for a while, you understand probably the difference between top level and entity level. And it's kind of a choice within most organizations as to whether you work at the top or whether you work in an entity. And it needs to be, the most important thing about it is that it needs to be consistent. So this is a way to ensure consistency. As a firm with Dean Dorton, we typically recommend that you work at the top level or the highest level that you have. That doesn't always hold true, but it is something that we typically do recommend. As you probably know, if you have multiple entities, if you do something at the top level and do something at the entity, they can be viewed differently. The private checkbox and several other things can sometimes get confusing if you're working at both. And so now we're giving an ability for admins, basically, to be able to go in and restrict users to work only at the top level. So restricting the top level does hold some, or does hide some fields. You can see them listed there on the screen. And that really gets down to not being able to do individual entity transactions with that. And you can see there on the field, or on the screen, it is just a single field checkbox. Restrict access to the top level. All right. Okay. That's pretty straightforward. Multi-enter usability. This is one that I am very glad to see in the system. So if you are an organization using Sage Intacct and you only have one legal entity, we are still going to put you into what's called a shared environment. The reason that we do that is that it's very difficult and costly for you later if we have to move you off of a single environment to a shared environment after you make an acquisition or something along those lines. So we go ahead and put you in the shared environment. It can sometimes, or in the past it could anyway, be a little awkward when entering transactions. You're in a multi-entity environment, you're at the top level, but you only have one company. So do I need to keep stipulating this all the time? What happens if I leave it blank? What if I miss one, right? That also gets into some of the entity level transactions versus the top level transactions. Now in Intacct, you will get the benefit of the fact that the default entity will be, or it will default the entity in the back end of the transaction user interface when only one entity exists. It's important to note that this is not a setting. This is not a box you need to check. So if you are using Sage Intacct in a multi-entity environment and you only have one legal entity, you don't have to do anything. You can work at the top level now, and it will code the entity to all of your transactions. If you have any questions about that, let us know. I don't feel like I quite explained that well, but if you have questions about it, let us know. It actually is a very nice feature for organizations that only have one entity in Sage Intacct. Multi-entity configuration with, so multi-entity configuration, basically what they have said here is that they are going to try to do a better job of making people know when choices are permanent. And this is really throughout the system. They're working on this as a general rule. They are going to be highlighting areas of the system, such as enabling multiple base currencies, where this is permanent after you enter transactions. User-defined books. After you enter transactions, you can't go back. Multiple-based currencies, you can't go back. So they are trying to make a conscious effort to warn you for these things that are point of no return selections. Okay? Domestic consolidations. So for those of you who have multiple entities in Sage Intacct with intercompany sales, intercompany payables, whatever it may be, you are oftentimes saddled with maybe a little bit of work in order to make the elimination entries, in order to, be able to eliminate intercompany sales and so forth, and report a true financial picture for the consolidated organization. Elimination entities exist in Intacct, but if you don't have a consolidations module, you do those entries yourself. Up until now, we've really only had the global consolidation module, and more or less on price, a lot of companies did not want to get it. Now we have a different option available for you called domestic consolidations. So here's a case if you only, for example, work in Canadian dollars or US dollars, but you can now work with the domestic consolidations to be able to set up the system so that it can do some of those eliminating entries for you. It's much the same functionality of the global consolidations. We're just eliminating some of the headache of the currency exchanges and some of the setup that's required for that. So we're excited about this. It's an ability to be able to roll out a module that could potentially benefit a lot of organizations to do consolidations where you don't have to struggle with the manual aspect of the elimination entries or anything like that. It's really a capability to auto-eliminate intercompany transactions and produce consolidated financial statements through the books that you create, the ways that you want to combine them, the specific accounts that you want to use for eliminations, and have all that happen for you automatically. Do note this is a permanent setting in here, and this is something that will have an additional cost. And if you're interested in it, please do reach out to Kim Denton or myself, and we'll be happy to talk you through what is available and what can be done with it. They can move. You can move to the full global consolidations module later. You can tailor this down to your environment if you're not using multiple different currencies. So there's a lot of capabilities within the domestic consolidations. It's a really nice module. I'm pretty excited to see them come out with this to benefit domestic customers, or I should say single currency customers, to give them some more automation without having to go to the full-blown global module. Projects. All right. This is what I'm also excited about. See, there's a lot of things in here that I'm excited about. This one is especially cool for two purposes. One, for professional service organizations. I think definitely this is a very cool feature, but since the project module is also repurposed for grant module for nonprofit, if you do any billing for your grants out of the system, and let's hope you do, if you don't, give us a call, and we can run through how that would work for you. But if you do, you also now have an ability to use this for your grant billing. And what this is, essentially, is the ability to include attachments on your project bills. So attachments, as the screen says, from source transactions with billable expenses, from AP bill, employee expenses, purchasing timesheets, and journal entries to the invoices that get generated via the generate invoice process. So as you are entering transactions into the system that relate back to a project/grant, you'll be able to include those attachments with the invoice. The invoice also will show those attachments inside of Intacct. So not only can you include them with the invoice, you can set the email template up to include the attachments when the invoice is sent out. So if you're billing for backup or if you're billing for disbursements, for example, you can include the backup with it. Great feature that I think potentially could save a lot of time. It will allow users to include attachments from the source transactions, include them with the printed invoices is not supported at this time. So if you print the invoice, the attachment at this time will not also print. But if you email them out, they will be attached, or I should say can be attached, because the end user will have the capability to not attach them. Okay. Next steps for this will be for time billed through contracts. So it's not in there right now, but it will be added in a future release for the ability for billing through the contracts. And I think that will also be a great feature. You can't control the attachment order on the generated invoice. That is done by the system. I don't know what the order is, if it's first come, first serve, or size, or name, or what it may be, but it attaches them. I think it's first come, first serve, based on the kind of transaction they were attached to. But nonetheless, this is a very exciting feature inside the system for our projects. I know a lot of not-for-profits, in fact, that do grant billing that do take a bit of time within their invoice generation process to include all of the backup that's needed. So I'm going to go through these inventory enhancements a little bit quicker. I do want to try to tool around in the system here for a little bit if we've got time, but I also want to save some time for questions too. So FIFO costing enhancements, bin functionality, serial lot expiration dates available to the FIFO costed items. Stockable kits are still required to be FIFO at this time. So hopefully, as it says, that may come in the release 2, but not yet fully determined at this point. They have added item cross-references. So what else would I want to call this, or what would a vendor call this, right? So some alternative information for items. When you're creating a sales order, you can use the item cross-reference. You can do the cross-reference at the customer level as well too. So if you really need to tailor your inventory and present it in an appropriate manner, even on a per customer basis, then you'll have that ability. It's available in purchasing and order entry, and the unit of measure on those cross-references does have to match between those two, which really just kind of makes sense. One of the things that I'm most excited about on the inventory side, believe it or not, is that you can actually do a CSV import for all build kits. So this is something that's new. We've had a few customers that have had a large build kit needs, and really it's been able now to do it via the API, the user interface only. So it's exciting to see that CSV import process. Bin quantities, we've made some improvements here in the usability and viewability of the bin quantities. Physical inventory report now also shows bin quantities as well as a few other information. items, so that's nice if you're using the bins. Warehouse tracking information. So we've added some things to the import of the CSV for the warehouse transfer. That's really nice to have those. Basic and advanced mode for maintaining your valuation. So a couple of different choices in here for the inventory costing. And if you're running into that, we can definitely kind of take that a little bit offline and talk to you about these things. But they've improved the user interface on the inventory side a bit. They've improved some of the selections and functions and things like that, just in some natural areas. They've given it a little bit more detail on the conversion of some of these items at a line item level so that you can see that, as well as pull it into custom reports. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at application foundation. You're now able to translate the employee terminology in release 1 of fiscal year 2021. Well, actually, it's not changed in the platform app. It will be changed in the platform app in release 2. So just a small clarification. And it's really just something that they've been meaning to get into the system, but they just hadn't at this point. The biggest thing that I think that I am excited about here in this area are the checklists. So folks have wanted, for example, a month-end checklist for a really long time, and nothing really existed in the system. But we are really pleased and proud to announce that it is fully there. Actually has been there for a little bit. The phase 1 that you see allowed creating of checklists and assignments. This phase of R1 of 2021 release will allow you to, for example, import those checklists. So you can have your longer month-end checklist. You can build it in Excel, save it as a CSV, and import it into the system. You can also then have assignments, and you can include dependencies with those assignments, and you can also collaborate on the assignments and checklists. So they're giving you an ability in the system now to create these checklists, have these checklists in the system, assign them to people, make the different tasks dependent so that Jane doesn't start her task until Mark has completed his, and you'll have an ability then to use the collaborate function within your checklist environments to have a conversation that is attached to the checklist and is part of that process. This is a great feature. It's access via company, all, and checklists. There's a lot of features, a lot of functions. I highly encourage you to take a look at these. Put them on your dashboards, the first little bullet point there, to see what is not done, for example. So a lot of things you can take advantage of. The biggest one that comes to mind is a month-end checklist, but really there could be a lot of things that you would use this for, maybe a billing checklist, a check run checklist. Depends on what your organization needs, right? It does have email notifications, as you can see here. So if you change something, complete something, whatever it may be, you have emails that go out, but you do have to enable them in My Preferences. So if I am using Intacct and I don't have those turned on, then I won't get the appropriate notifications. So there's no additional subscription fee for that. It's part of the core application. It does not enforce any functionality. So unfortunately, it is not going to either reconcile your bank account or make you reconcile your bank account as part of the checklist, but that last bullet point, automation may be coming in phase 3 and beyond. And getting back to what I'm most excited about in this release with the Geo Outlier, that is actually part of automated intelligence and machine learning, checklists, outlier detection, machine learning, getting you to a point and process to which you are continually auditing your system, self-auditing your system, and continually having a system that is optimal and doesn't need to be closed because you've already checked things, right? You're checking it constantly as you go, and that's really where we're headed. So there's security around the checklist, as you can see there, where it's checklist, assignments, checklist categories. It's very detailed security and permissions around those. Okay. Here's the checklist information, for example, with some choices here for a month-end close and reconciling AP and AR and who they're assigned to, when they're due, percentage completes, things like that. Right now, again, all that is manual, but you know, look to the future, get in on it now, look to the future for a lot of innovations in that area. So what I'm going to say at this point with this, because we are getting close to 3 o'clock, if you are in a multi-tax situation where you've got VAT tax or GST, please talk to us. There have been some significant changes in that area, and we're excited to talk with you about those changes and see if they would help you as well. Again, we've talked about the custom report writer component, the new menu breakdown. We've talked about that before. Here's an example, though, and this is something that I also think is a very small feature that could be really nice in a company that might have a lot of custom reports, especially. Had a customer call up a couple of weeks ago. Person was leaving. They knew all the report structures and how everything was laid out and really had kind of kept it to themselves. I think this would really help them in the future, you know, eliminate some of that by setting up report types and report audiences so that you can designate, much like they did with groups, I believe it was, and group types that they had, or purposes. Same type of thing where they're now allowing you to kind of tag and set up these different enhancements. There's some pre-built time attributes, some new ones in the custom reporting areas for ICRW and the new Visual Explorer, prior year quarter, prior year date, for example. They've updated some content on the ICRW, and they've added some functionality to the brand new Visual Explorer piece that has been out in both alpha and beta for a little while, so we're excited to see them add that information. So here again, where can I find more information? You go to the little house icon, you go to resources and release notes, and you'll see a ton of information in regards to Sage Intacct in there and the new preview release. So any questions at this point? We've got about 5 minutes.
As of now, we don't have any questions, but we'll give it a few minutes for sure.
Okay. While we give it a few minutes, I do want to show you, and I've got a demo Intacct environment here. Again, the GL outlier detection. So if you go to company and, you know, let us know if you're going to do this, want to do this, would like to discuss it. You go to company, you go to admin and subscriptions, and there's a choice right here for AI and machine learning. All you really have to do is turn it on. There are some configuration choices, whether you enable the data service, which you do have to do in order to use this, but Sage does want you to check the box to ensure that you're doing it, and whether you want to use it in the general ledger approval process, and what the email address is for the person that is configuring this. So this is not who's going to get every notification about a problem. This is just the person who is configuring the application. It does take some time to be enabled. I'm in a demo environment, so it's going to take a long time because these don't have any kind of precedent to them for importance. But it will send an email to this address when that data service is ready. To give you a bit of a hint, I did check this box just before noon today. It's 3 p.m. here, so it's been running for a little over 3 hours and still pending. So this isn't something that turns on really quickly. It does go back and parse through all of your old data so that it builds a history and has something to base its decisions on. So I'm really, really excited about that feature. I think it is literally the tip of the iceberg, and that there are a lot of other things that are coming down the pike in AP and AR and order entry and purchasing. You know, imagine all of your transactions being instantaneously checked or verified against your past history. It will help really eliminate any keying errors or potentially fraud or things like that. You know, it's not a perfect system. It's not going to do everything exactly right all the time, but I can't imagine it's not going to add a lot of help to any Sage Intacct customer to help them cut down on the time they spend reconciling the system.